Hi, my name is Mike Beam, and I have the pleasure of serving as your Secretary of Agriculture in Kansas. I want to welcome you to the 6th Annual Kansas Governors Summit on Ag Growth. Tonight, of course, is the discussion about specialty crop sector, and I'm always excited to learn more about the opportunities and what many of our entrepreneurs in the state are doing in this sector. Like we've done in the past, like we did last year anyway, we have our sector sessions done in advance virtually prior to the full summit, which is scheduled for August 26th. And we do that. So number one, we started that because of the limitations last year with the pandemic, but now it seems to make sense to do this to allow a schedule that maybe most people can participate in, even some like this in the evening. So it's a good opportunity to really focus here for a little bit with some presenters, and most importantly, the feedback. The feedback that we get through these sector sessions are very helpful, and we like to compare that to what's been identified in the past years and see if it's consistent or if there's a new initiative, and really try to focus on what can make a difference. And of course, all of that with participation and engagement with folks like you. So please don't be bashful at that time. That will be your chance to weigh in. So again, I want to thank you for participating. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Janelle Dobbins and let her kick it off. But thank you all.
Thank you, Secretary Beam. I'm Janelle Dobbins with the Kansas Department of Agriculture, Division of Agricultural Marketing. We're so glad that you've joined us tonight to talk about specialty crops. So for the next hour and a half, approximately, we're going to talk about this great sector that's an important part of the state's agricultural economy. According to the Kansas Department of Agriculture's in-plan economic model, the estimated direct impact of the vegetable and melon farming, fruit farming, tree nut farming, and greenhouse, nursery, and floriculture production sectors is 88.2 million in output and 644 jobs. Including indirect and induced effects, the total impact of the sector on the Kansas economy reaches 145.7 million in output and 986 jobs. An additional model shows the impact of the wineries sector on the Kansas economy. The sector has a direct output of 40.2 million and accounts for 146 jobs. And in total, that sector contributes 61.4 million in output and 253 jobs. But the vision of our agency is to provide an ideal environment for long-term sustainable agricultural prosperity and statewide economic growth. Our summit sector sessions provide the platform to entertain opportunities and barriers to agricultural industry growth for our state. At this point, most of us have been doing Zoom for a while, but there's just a couple of quick housekeeping items I want to review just so we're all clear for tonight. So during the presentation portion of the session, if you can just remember to keep your mics muted while folks are speaking, we would appreciate it. But if you have any questions, of course, you can either put them into the chat while they're speaking, or at the end of it, we'll give you an opportunity to unmute and ask the question live if you would like. Also, the session is being recorded and will be posted online later. When you do ask a question in chat, if it makes sense, include your name, city, and organization if applicable. But I would like to introduce Gabe Spurgeon with South Baldwin Farms. You're going to see him on a video here in just a little bit. He's going to provide an update about the Kansas Specialty Crop Growers Association. And right after that video, Peter Pearson is going to be speaking, who is the project manager of KSCGA. So Gabe and Peter, welcome, and thank you for being with us tonight.
Welcome to the Kansas Department of Agriculture Ag Growth Summit. My name's Gabe Spurgeon, and we wanted to do a pre-recorded video in the field because if you're like me, you're tired of Zoom. It's been a couple of years. I want to get in the field. I want to start doing field tours again. So at least we can do that a little bit as I introduce the Kansas Specialty Crop Growers Association to y'all. We were formed about 3 years ago. We go by the acronym KSCGA, and we formed from the Vegetable Growers Association. It's an umbrella organization to give us a little more strength in numbers. We cover grapes, turf grass, cut flowers, tree fruit, vegetables, a wide variety as defined by the USDA specialty crops. One of the things I wanted to talk about is what are the benefits of specialty crops in Kansas. It's not traditionally a specialty crop state. However, if you look back in our rich history, we did have quite a wine industry before Prohibition. We had a very large tree fruit industry prior to the Armistice Day freeze in, I believe it was 1948. But it's been primarily big ag, row crops, beef, beans, but now we need to look back and we need to look at diversification. And a great way to do that is specialty crops. It's less acres, less water intense, and higher dollar value per acre. So KSCGA can provide you with that support when you're getting started, or if you've been doing it for 40 years, you can provide support to other people or learn something new every day. One of the things that we do on our farm with our tree fruit is drape netting. It helps protect from hail, birds, wind, sunburn. We also use reflective fabric, which improves the color despite the netting blocking the sun. It gets the color up underneath and makes a more uniform harvest in our orchard. There's many things we can learn about from working together across this big state. We can take our directory so that we can, let's say we grow pumpkins, and we want to take our field that looks like this and make it look like that. Or if you grow in high tunnels or hay groves, or if you are interested in that, vineyards, cut flowers. We've got such a great network, and we can work with Kansas Department of Agriculture, Kansas State University to learn and grow specialty crops in the state. I want to thank you for joining the session. If you're interested in becoming a member of KSCGA, already are a member, want to become more active, you can reach out to me. We'll make sure and include my contact information somewhere in the chat. My email address is simply gabe@southbaldwin.farm. We've also got a KSCGA email address and a website. You can go to kscga.org. Thanks again for joining me, and look forward to a great session tonight.
Hello, everyone. Follow up on what Gabe said. Yes, we are a 501c5 organization founded a couple of years ago. I was hired as the project manager in January of this year under a specialty crop block grant for organizational development, building outreach, building networking, building up our communications and outreach effort, and getting some information, start organizing and adding to our information we have about what's going on in the state. We currently have a paid membership of about 120 or so. That's grown quite a bit actually from last year. We've got an outreach, a mailing list of over 300 right now of friends of. And one of our goals this year is just to increase our actual paid membership. Right now, a membership is only $10, or again, just for the sake of building our base. And you can go, I think, you did post our website. That's got links to both membership. You can access our latest newsletter that just came out. The latest newsletter highlighted some things. I've been traveling a lot lately. I just got back from Garden City. I see one of the farms I visited out there the other day, active on this Zoom meeting right now. But I've been mostly all across the state except for to the northwest, from mushroom growers and independents to vineyards up in the Kaw Valley to people growing vegetables in ornamentals and aromatics in the Garden City area. There's a lot going on out there. One of the primary goals and objectives of the grant that I'm working under right now is just to enhance our networking. Gabe had mentioned that we're very active in just having people share information, from people who are just getting started to people like Gabe who have a wealth of experience. Right now, we our Facebook group, our members Facebook group, grower members is, I think, is over 280 people, and it's much more active than I had anticipated. There's a lot of sharing going on out there. And we are currently working with a database directory developer to put together a very user-friendly online directory system where people can just tap into other growers who are doing the same thing. If you've got some interest, some questions about a certain crop, a certain way of growing things, even a certain sales strategy, a sales platform, we're going to hopefully have that up and going in the next couple of months. We're working with developers right now. But like I said, Gabe, you had posted our website. We encourage people to go on. There's more on the organization. There's more on what we're trying to accomplish. And there's also links to our Facebook group and our website newsletter. And we are in the process of, we just had a rollout of a very basic survey to just start the process of getting some more information, adding to our database of what's going on out in the state. It's 9 questions. It takes about 5 minutes to complete. We've got a link to that. If you scroll up to our website, if you go to our website, we've got a link to that right on the homepage as well. So I encourage those of you who haven't looked into us that are growing, do give us a look. And if you're so moved, I encourage you to join up and get on our mailing list, become a member, and get involved. We look forward to having you.
Thanks, Peter, for that additional information. And thanks, Gabe, for making that video and sending it so we could share it with everyone. It's always a delight to hear what KSCGA is up to. Remember, if anyone has any questions, to be putting them into the chat or to kind of be raising your hand or letting us know if you want to be asking them live. Carrie Weefald with the ag marketing team is going to be watching and reviewing and making sure that we're catching all of those questions in chat tonight. So next up, we're actually going to do a quick poll. So the Kansas Department of Agriculture is looking at a specialty crop block grant opportunities, and we want to know what you guys feel would be most beneficial. So you're going to see that there's 3. Okay, actually, this is a different poll that they put up than what I thought was going to. So sorry about that, folks. So the poll that they actually put up here is what you want the specialty crops sector to work on in this next year. So you're going to be hearing about here what we are currently working on, and one of the main things we are working on, and Peter just talked about it, that KSCGA is leading, is they are doing a quick survey out to everyone. So that's the first thing that we're going to be working on, but we're looking for kind of what's that second priority. So is it additional K-State research and extension folks? Is it the development of the Kansas Specialty Crop Network to support mid to large scale food processors? Is it the identification of temporary seasonal alternative workforce? And then if you have an other option, put it into the chat. So I'm going to give you here about another minute to answer. We'll give you here another like 20 seconds to go here. To make sure we capture everybody's votes. And while we're waiting, Carrie, is there anything in the chat box that we need to talk about?
Not yet, but if anyone has anything, I'll pick it up here and then pose it back to the presenter or the appropriate person to answer.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think we've got votes in from everyone, so we will end the polling here and see what it's kind of looking like. It looks like we had 65% of the people pick additional K-State research and extension specialists, and increased specialty crop and horticulture research is going to probably be our other thing we're definitely going to be working on. We had 25% pick the development of Kansas Specialty Crop Network to support mid to large scale food processors, and another 10% pick the identification of temporary, seasonal, and alternative workforce. And just because any of these other items weren't the top ones, it doesn't mean they're not being worked on. They just may not be the top priority that we're working on. So We will now move on to introducing Ashley Weavy and Gavin Tate with the Queen Bee Marketing Agency. They're gonna be talking about digital marketing engagement tips for all of you tonight, because that is definitely one of the things that's been asked about, is being able to learn more about how to work with digital marketing. So Ashley and Gavin.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being on tonight. And we thank the Kansas Department of Agriculture for having us as well. Gavin is under the weather today, so I will be taking over this. We will be screen sharing with you all a PowerPoint presentation that we have put together on some helpful tips that hopefully will help you guys with your digital marketing engagement tips. And that's exactly what we were talking about today. So I'm going to screen share with you all. All right, can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, so we are Queen Bee Marketing. We are a digital marketing service here in Hutchinson, Kansas. So a little about us, we are a full service marketing agency. We want to encourage everybody to include everything when it comes to marketing, whether it be aerial footage of your fields or blogs written by your professionals that they know exactly what they're talking about, maybe some FAQ sections on your website, professional photography, videography, website development, motion graphics to stop the scroll, graphic design, rebranding, social media management, anything that you can think of, we're here to help you. So when it comes to social media and all parts of marketing, you really want to think about who is your audience. And in order to build your audience, you obviously want to connect with them, and they want to be entertained and they want to be inspired. So when you think about demographic, you're going to look at your audience. You're going to look at the age you're trying to reach, the gender, and maybe where they're located. So on the next slide, we have what makes them tick. So how do you want to get them to interact with you? You want them to click on your links and maybe read your blogs. The next one is, where are they? What is your low hanging fruit? Do you want to look at whether maybe it's somebody that's 30 miles within the radius of your business, or maybe you're just looking at the entire state of Kansas. Maybe look at what platforms that they're on. Maybe they have social media platforms, so that you look at Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, maybe Twitter. All of those are really good, useful avenues for all of you. And maybe you look at what devices they're using. If they're on desktop, or if they're on mobile devices, or if they're on tablets. Maybe you want to look at what struggles they're looking at. So struggles of what your clients are looking for dictates on what they are searching for and what behaviors they are exhibiting. And this gives you a great opportunity to start a great conversation with them. First, we're going to look at logo and branding. So your brand identity is your business. An audience is more likely to engage with your brand if it is familiar, and they tend to trust it more. No matter what marketing services we discuss today, make sure that your brand is consistent on all platforms. As you can see here, logos are a great way to maximize your efforts, building brand awareness and engagement. You'll see our branding throughout this presentation as a way for us to show you how you are practicing what we preach. So when we look at social media strategy, we look at the rule of thirds. A third of what your content needs to be posted needs to be internal, a third external, and a third of your products or services. Unfortunately, most people, most of the time, post 90% of their posts about their products or services. And unfortunately, this lets people fall out of your Facebook or social media algorithm. In order to enhance these things, you can use things like posting internally. Who is your company? What humanizes your company? Maybe birthdays, anniversaries, highlighting your people, maybe their accomplishments, or maybe some, if they've been there, like work anniversaries, like 5 years, 10 years, big milestone events for them. The next, we want to look at external. This is the community that you work with, maybe the people that you network with, industries that you're doing business with, or maybe some local sponsorships that you're involved with. The last we want to talk about is your products or services. So this allows you to bring people in with your internal and external posts and then sell them on your services for your third of what you're trying to accomplish. We really want to push that you guys use each other as a huge networking asset to all of you. So whether you go in and like the Kansas Department of Agriculture on social media, if you go like From the Land of Kansas on social media, or you go like each other on social media, we really encourage you guys to use each other as a network. The next thing we're going to talk about is websites. Just like social media, websites provide an excellent digital presence, and when they're done right, you get amazing engagement, what makes for a great website. You want to talk about specific content on what you're trying to accomplish and what problems you're trying to fix for them. You want to look at functionality. You want to walk your end user from start to finish. So you want it to be super user friendly. You want to figure out what their goal is. Do you want them to give you a phone call? Do you want them to fill out a contact sheet? Figure out what's working best for the type of people that you're trying to work with. Most likely when you're building out websites, you know your content really well. So you're going to look at what best content works best for search engine optimization. When it comes to SEO, these are the words that people are going to be using most, and these will help you rank higher on digital platforms. You also want to talk about rich and powerful content like videos and photos, but we will talk about those here and on a different slide. For organic SEO, the first thing I want you all to look at is your website, your Google business listing, and your social media pages. On each of these three platforms, Google is going to be ranking you on maybe whether you land on the first page or the 9th page when people are putting your services into a search engine bar. You want to make sure that on all three of these things, you have cohesive messaging. So that is your address, your phone number, your contact person, photography. All of these need to be cohesive, or Google will look at you like you are not a reliable source. So if you have a different phone number on your website than you do on your Google business listing, people don't know how to get a hold of you. So make sure on all three of those platforms that they are all consistent. Another great service is photography. So photography enables you to have a very visual that is very powerful tool to increase interest and engagement. Some of the best engaging campaigns use photos and videos to tell their stories. You want to make sure you have professional headshots, professional group shots, community and event coverage that shows it from a different aspect. Maybe cute, cool, and unique aerial footage. You can do that in photography and videography. How about product photography, whatever you're selling or whatever services you may provide? You also want to talk about creative videos. Whether you're on social media or a website, video stops the scroll. Ask yourself, does your business have a company overview video? How about testimonials, animation, product-focused video to sell your products, and many more to give you the ability to be creative and bring digital marketing to life? The next we're going to talk about is digital and social advertising. There are a couple different ways that you can do advertising. We have Google advertising, we have search and display ads, and then we also have social advertising. Through digital advertising, you can target your ideal customers based on their location, their demographic, what behaviors they're exhibiting, and what keywords that they're searching for. Then you can turn around and deliver your ads specifically to the thousands of websites that they are already going onto on a daily basis. This is an affordable advertising medium and a great way to drive lots of ideal clients to your website. When we talk about marketing, we want to talk about marketing in a full marketing campaign. When you look at a full marketing campaign, it is in a full circle and it has a lot of pieces that go to it. So whether you're doing social media management, television ads, website headers and messaging, press releases, radio ads, you want to make sure it's all consistent information that's putting out on a quarterly campaign. Look at all your marketing mediums, and this gives you the best way to maximize on your investment and create the engagement you are looking for. Cohesive branding and messaging across all of your marketing mediums help you accomplish your goals and needs with a full circle marketing campaign. Every business and audience is unique. Your marketing plan should be too. It takes a full team to accomplish all the areas with professionalism. Don't get overwhelmed by trying to do it all yourself. Utilize the resources around you. For instance, look at the Kansas Department of Agriculture and From the Land of Kansas and see what options they have for you to help with marketing and advertising. Local marketing campaigns can be very helpful and can get your message out to everybody that you need it to. And definitely rely on other people that are also in your profession. They have great resources and assets that are available to you and everything else. When it comes to marketing, it does take a full team. You need to think about every aspect of what you're trying to accomplish and figure out how best that's going to help you make that happen. Putting this all together can be very time consuming. Rely on the professionals and make it easier on you so you can focus on what you do best. We are Queen Bee Marketing, and let us help you make your mark.
Thanks, Ashley. If anybody has questions at all about that, just make sure and put them into the chat box. But we'll get started with our next speaker then. So next up is Dwayne Simon, who works with the Kansas Department of Agriculture, and then Bethany Olson, who's with EPA R7, and they're going to be discussing worker protection standards with us. So Dwayne and Bethany, you can take it away, and we will get your slideshow up here for you.
Good evening, everybody. We're glad to have you with us. We wanted to talk with you just a little bit about worker protection standards as it might affect you if you apply a pesticide, an ag pesticide in some of your specialty crops. Bethany Olson is actually going to start us on the slide, and I'll take up the end. So go ahead, Bethany.
Yeah, thanks, Dwayne. Good evening, everyone. Like Dwayne said, my name is Bethany Olson. I work in the pesticide program at EPA Region 7. And today we'll just be giving a quick update on some of the recent changes to the worker protection standard. So though we won't be able to cover the whole WPS tonight, we hope you to share some recent updates, and hope this is helpful as you all go forward in your businesses. Next slide, please. So we'll keep this pretty quick. Like Dwayne said, I'll be kicking us off talking about some of the recent rule revisions, as well as some background on what the WPS is. Then I'll turn it over to Dwayne. We'll really go over kind of the meat and potatoes of what agricultural employers might need to know about the revisions, as well as offer resources for more information. Next slide. So back in 2015, EPA finalized revisions to the WPS rule to decrease pesticide exposure incidents among farm workers and their family members. As you can see here in this graphic, there was a phased implementation, but now in 2021, compliance is required with all elements of the 2015 WPS rule. So let's kind of dive into what some of those are. Next slide. So the WPS protects employees from occupational exposure to agricultural pesticides. This includes pesticide handlers, folks who mix, load, or apply agricultural pesticides. Handlers also include people who clean or repair application equipment and or are involved in pesticide applications. For example, maybe a flagger would be involved in a pesticide application. It also includes agricultural workers who perform tasks related to growing and harvesting plants on farms or in greenhouses, nurseries, or forests. Workers include anyone who is employed for any type of compensation, and that can also include folks who are self-employed and perhaps, doing some contract labor. So sometimes, we're talking with people, we'll hear folks say, maybe we don't have any employees in our business. We just employ people seasonally that help us, or maybe we have high school kids who help us out seasonally. And so if those folks are doing worker tasks related to the production of agricultural products and receiving compensation, though they might not be employed year round, they are considered workers under the WPS. And employers are responsible for the WPS compliance. And I guess a final note on that as well, that the WPS is implemented through the agricultural use requirements box on pesticide labels. You can find that box usually under the directions for use towards the top of the pesticide label. You'll see that ag use requirements. Next slide, please. So the WPS applies when there's use of a WPS labeled pesticide product on an agricultural establishment directly related to the production of an agricultural plant and employment of workers or handlers. An agricultural establishment is any farm, forest operation, or nursery engaged in outdoor or enclosed space production of agricultural plants, such as grains, fruits, vegetables, timber products, plants and trees, seedlings, and even turf grass produced for sod. Next slide. And I just want to do a quick note on owners and their immediate family exempt. There's an exemption for that. So when handling pesticide, the agricultural establishment owners and immediate family members, of course, must follow the pesticide label instructions, including the personal protective equipment listed on the label. But they are exempt from most provisions of the worker protection standard. Those immediate family members include the ag establishment owner's spouse, parents, children, even in-laws, grandparents, grandchildren, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, first cousins. However, so I know I come from a family farm up in Nebraska. And while most of our employees are family members, in our case, we do employ a few non-family members. And so, establishments that are similar, have a similar setup, they do have to require, or they are required to provide WPS protections to any non-family members who are employed. Okay, and so I've kind of gone over, what the WPS is and when it applies. Next, I'm going to hand it over to Dwayne to kind of dig into what the requirements of the WPS are. Dwayne?
Okay. Yes, next we'll get into some of the specifics and more the nuts and bolts of WPS. One of the important parts is, of course, is to inform workers and handlers through things like posted signs for field posting, like you see there, or greenhouse posting. Other ways is through training. The workers and handlers are required to be trained, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and they've updated the training. Some other important aspects are protection of especially handlers through PPE, such as your goggles, protective eyewear, gloves, the respirator you see there, and maybe Tyvek coveralls or aprons. Another important component of WPS is to mitigate any exposures. If someone accidentally touches the plant that's been sprayed, they can wash their hands at a decontamination site. Soap, water, and paper towels are required to be available. So that's an important aspect as well. Next slide, please. Going into the training and things that need to be available for communication, both workers and handlers have to have annual pesticide safety training. An employer can do that through various means, like showing a video if they're there in a language they can understand, teaching them through a workbook or through some other prepared materials. There are updated training materials and requirements. Some of the updated training for the workers had to do with making sure workers understood that pregnant women and children were especially susceptible to pesticides, and maybe to have pregnant women avoid working around pesticides. And for children, avoid hugging them after you come home if you've got pesticide residue on your clothing. You see there a picture of a central location. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a glass case like that. It can be the safety poster, which has been updated. It's no longer the one that's in that glass case. It can be on a bulletin board with the safety data sheets that are required to be there and the application records. They could also be near at hand, like on a desk, right by that central location. But people need to have access to those application records, safety data sheets, the nearest medical facility, what to do in case there's emergency. And in some cases, for some groups, there may be a designated representative that gets information for the worker if he's no longer at that facility or doesn't speak English. Also, the warning signs. There's scenarios where, okay, more products or have the field posted signs, more products. I think anything with an REI of 48 hours or greater now has to have field posting signs. So that's being communicated as well. Next slide, please. Okay. Again, except for the family farm exclusion, pesticide handlers have to be a minimum of 18 and early entry workers. And those early entry workers might be someone that would go into the field while it's under restrictive entry interval. Say the label says that the restrictive entry interval is 24 hours. Workers and others should stay out of that field for 24 hours. But in some cases, workers may have to go into water or move irrigation pipe. Those have to be trained as early entry workers, and they have to be, of course, made known that the field's under an REI and provided training on that. The application exclusion zone is something new with the 2015 rules and kind of involves the agriculture establishment, like the farm itself. You could think of perhaps while it's being sprayed as the application exclusion zone. Under the 2015 rule, there's kind of a bubble around, as you see an airplane there to the left, there's kind of a 100-foot bubble around that airplane as it's spraying. So as it comes close to the edge of the field, people on a county road near that field could actually fall under application exclusion zone under the 2015 rules. There's also instruction for the early entry workers, as I mentioned, to protect them so they understand the basics of pesticides and PPE they need to wear to protect themselves. The respirator rules are strengthened under the new 2015 rules. They're somewhat similar to OSHA in that if the label requires you to wear a respirator, of course you have to wear it. You have to be fit tested for it. You have to be trained on that particular respirator and have a medical qualification to wear it. So those are some of the kind of revisions meant to protect people. Next slide, please. Okay. And then we have our revisions meant to mitigate, and you can see there a water wagon where fresh water is available. The enhanced requirements are some of this may have come through the old rules too. You have to have a gallon of water available for every worker and 3 gallons of water available for every handler on the establishment in that particular area that's under an REI. And also, of course, have to have the soap and paper towels available. Also, if you're a handler and mixing a product that requires protective eyewear, you have to have a eye flush available at the mixing loading area. And if you're applying a product that requires protective eyewear, when it's diluted, you have to have the eye wash with you as you're making the application, or nearby you as you're making the application. These are some of the new ways to mitigate exposures. The amount of water on that wagon that's needed if you had a whole bunch of workers would just be a gallon times every worker at the start of the workday. It would have to be available. We realize some of that may disappear as the day goes on as people wash up. Okay, next slide, please. They proposed some revisions to the AEZ, which is the application exclusion zone again, in October 30, 2020. And these were things like the AEZ only consisting of the field that was being sprayed. That bubble around the airplane didn't go around the outside the application field, which would be easier for the applicator because they may not have control of people, say, that are county workers that are working on the county right of way, that's not involved in the application field, or they may not have control over people that are in a leased mineral area next to the field. Some other things that were in the proposed revision were family members, if they had a home in that application field, could shelter in place. Let's see, and there were revisions on if an applicator had to suspend an application because there were people in the field. Once the people left, they made it clear that they could continue the application. Again, if you think of an aerial applicator spraying and there happens to be somebody working on the pivot in the field, he should stop until that person leaves the field so he doesn't accidentally spray them. Next slide, please. Compliance resources available. The good news is there's a whole bunch of materials available. The PERC, which stands for Pesticide Educational Resources Collaborative, they're out of University of California, Davis and Oregon State. They've combined together to put out these compliance materials, and the website is there. I'd encourage you to order it. Right now, I believe it's free. And free shipping if you order the materials. We're planning on putting in an order for our program to have things like the pesticide safety posters that maybe perhaps we can give out when we do inspections, and to have some how to comply manuals. There's also a memory stick with a whole bunch of the training materials and other stuff on it, which would be handy to have, where you could have most everything in one place. There's booklets on respirator information. Just a lot of stuff is available on that PERC website. I would advise you guys to take advantage of that and get some of the training materials. They also may be available at several other outlets that you use, places where you buy your greenhouse supplies. May also have some of the WPS materials, but the PERC website is kind of cool because they're right now they're offering that stuff at no charge. Next slide, please. And I guess that is our presentation. Are there questions? I think I missed a question in the chat as we were going through this.
Very good. Hey, Wayne and Bethany, thank you for that question. I have been monitoring the chat. I also want to thank Cal and Tom for also dropping some information in. So we did have a couple of questions. The first one is, I know sometimes we like to speak in acronyms and abbreviations. And one of the simple questions from one of our viewers is, what is WPS and what does that mean? So I'm going to let the two of you just explain what WPS means, since we referenced it through both of our presentations. Would you like to share that?
Go ahead, Bethany.
Yeah, we work for the government, so we love speaking in acronyms. So the WPS is stands for the Worker Protection Standard, or the long-term agricultural worker protection standard, specifically EPA's WPS rule.
Very good. Thank you for explaining that. And then we had another question that came in from Amy Hadashek. And she said if the for the rules, if the latest are from 2015, aren't there newer rules since then that would govern our worker protection standards?
So the federal rule, the latest revision was in 2015. It does take a pretty substantial effort to revise those federal rules. So they aren't revised very often. So that is the most current version, is the 2015 version that's out there. As Dwayne mentioned, the EPA did proposed and then issued a final rule changes in 2020 for some AEZ revisions. However, before the implementation date, there was a petition, and so those are currently, this implementation date is stayed. So those AEZ revisions are not in effect right now. And so 2015 is the most current.
Great, thank you. We also have a question come in from Gabe Spurgeon. His question is, how does a farm required train employees do that? How does a farm required to train employees do that in compliance with the law? Is there an official training available through USDA or PERC?
Yes, they can use the training materials from PERC, the PERC, the Pesticide Educational Resource Collaborative, and that will count if they go through the training with their employees and they're actually physically present. Now, I didn't mention, I guess, in the talk that someone that trains them, the worker, should be a certified applicator, a trainer, or a state designated representative. So they may need to have a certified applicator do the training, but a private applicator does qualify as a certified applicator, so they may train employees, if that helps.
Great, thank you for that answer. Very good. We also had a social media question, and Queen Bee dropped a social media answer into the chat. So we'll bring that up at this time. Any other questions or comments on worker protection and safety? We have so much to think about in the food and agriculture space. We certainly want to take care of our family and friends and employees who are working on our farms. Cal, do you have a message or a comment that you'd like to share within the worker protection conversation?
Yeah, we're actually trying to get something launched through K-State, but in the meantime, I have done the train the trainer, and I'm a licensed applicator and offer it for farmers as a stopgap. So if you have questions or want to review that or talk about compliance, just let me know.
Great, thank you for that. We always appreciate our partnership and our friends at K-State Research and Extension. I think that's all the questions right now for Dwayne and Bethany. So I'm going to kick it back to Janelle and have her go ahead and close out this session. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. And thank you very much, Dwayne and Bethany. That was very interesting. I learned a lot about worker protection standards. And actually, we were just talking about, we have a great relationship with K-State, which brings us to our next speaker. So Marty Draper with K-State Research and Extension is going to be talking about the future of specialty crops. So I will turn it over to Marty.
All right, I think I've got the right slide up there right now. I want to thank you for having me come and visit with you today. You know, in these days, I tend to spend a lot of time just kind of shuffling paper, and I focus on the research side of our operation with KSRE. But you know, I did spend 20 years, nearly 20 years, as an extension specialist, as a plant pathologist, and while a good portion of my career has been working in wheat and soybeans and sunflowers, but I also worked in onions, potatoes, asparagus, melons, tomatoes, a little bit in turf, some herb production, trees, and nursery crops. So there's a lot about specialty crops that really have been part of my career and are important to the things that I think are a part of agriculture and where agriculture is going. And so let's figure out which of my keys actually advance my slides here. Give me just a second. I need to bring up a screen that I had muted. So I'm going to bore you all with a little bit of data on our current investment at K-State and at KSRE in the specialty crop, the resources to work with specialty crops. And really, the biggest investment we have in the university is in people. And so I want to talk a little bit about the Horticulture and Natural Resources Department and where our faculty are there. We've got about 20 faculty that are tenure track faculty, full faculty, and about another five to six that are funded through external sources, that we consider those to be our non-tenure track faculty. When you break that down into teaching, research, and extension, the three legs of the land grant stool, the functions that we are involved in, where we commit those people, about 11 of those are committed to teaching, about another 10 in research, and about 6 of those individuals, or parts of 6, parts that equal 6 individuals are in extension. So when I talk about FTEs, my acronym for today, I'm talking about full-time equivalents. So it might be half of one individual and half of another individual to make one full-time equivalent. But when we look at that in the 3 academic emphases of that department, you've got horticulture, you've got wildlife and outdoor enterprise management, you got parks and recreation that come together to get you that 20 people. In the horticulture world, we've actually only got 15 faculty and 2 non-tenure track faculty. When we break that down into where the research, teaching, and extension full-time equivalents are, we wind up seeing that focusing in the horticulture world, we've only got about 6 in teaching, 7 in research, and 4.5 in extension. So these other 2 academic emphases in the department are taking some people into areas that aren't necessarily what we would consider to be specialty crop related. But I also want to emphasize that we have contributing faculty in other departments as well. So we've got an individual in plant pathology that has 8/10 of their responsibility in extension, another 2/10 in research. And that's probably a little bit less right now, considering that individual is also serving as the department head. In entomology, we've got an individual that has a 7/10 responsibility in extension and 3/10 in research, maybe a little bit more than that in actual breakdown. We've got a couple of individuals at 2 of the research and extension centers that are no longer directly on the books of the department, Kerry Rivard and Jason Griffin. And so that gives us another full FTE in extension and nearly a full FTE in research for those 2. But I also really want to emphasize that out in the extension world, out across the state, we've got a number of folks out there that make a big difference. And we've got some of those folks on the call today, and we've got some that are on the program. And so we'll be hearing more about that as we move along here today. But in addition to looking at those three programmatic areas within the department, I tried to take the horticulture and natural resources faculty, the tenure track and the non-tenure track faculty, and break them out a little bit in some of the sectors of the specialty crop world, looking at turf, floriculture, industrial hemp, woody and ornamental plants, greenhouse, physiology and molecular biology, which is probably not something that most of you think of as being a specialty crop issue, but it does represent some of what those faculty do. And then the fruit and vegetable world. And so what we wind up seeing is that our teaching, research, and extension in turf, for example, is between 1 and 2 FTEs. In floriculture, it's less than 1 FTE that's really contributing to that part of the program across teaching, research, and extension. About 1 FTE in industrial hemp, maybe even a little bit less than that. In woody plants and ornamentals, we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2 or 3 rather full FTEs committed to that portion of the enterprise, about 1 in greenhouse, about a little over 2 in physiology and molecular biology. And then over in the fruits and vegetables area, where we've got little more than 7 people that are involved in it, it actually amounts to something in the neighborhood of a little over 2 FTEs in research, a little over 1 in teaching, and about a half an FTE in extension that kind of come out of several people. So those numbers do not include the numbers for Carrie Rivard or Jason Griffin, because they are falling into a different unit right now. But as I mentioned before, that gives you about another 2 full FTEs in across the spectrum. Now, one of the things I did want to share with you that has happened in this last about the last year is that we've done a realignment of some of our facilities within KSRE. And in the Eastern Kansas Research and Extension Centers, we've actually adopted the Olathe Horticulture REC and the John C. Pear Center and rolled them into KSRE facilities to go along with the Southeast Research and Extension Center and the Northeast Research and Extension Center. The point in this was to try and take some of the pressure off of the department, help them be managed at the experiment station and cooperative extension level, and hopefully be able to add some additional resources into the management of those locations. At the same time, when we look at the model across the state, you really kind of break down this eastern group into the eastern centers, and then the west has been pretty much functioning in that way for quite some time. But that really includes the Agricultural Research Center in Hayes, the Northwest Research and Extension Center in Colby, and the Southwest Research and Extension Center in Garden City, with a satellite station in Tribune. Now, when you look at the footprint that you have in the West for specialty crops, there's not much there. And I think that's something that is worthy of looking at as we take a look at where we're going to go. The same thing can be said in the East, where we clearly have a footprint in Olathe and Hayesville. The question is, what more should we be doing in the Southeast and the Northeast? Is this an opportunity? And I know that the folks in the Southeast Center have identified that they would really like to see someone down there that had a horticulture emphasis to help with development of the horticulture industry in that part of the state. But when it comes down to trying to guess what's going to happen in the future, that's where the challenges really come. I'm not sure how many people are aware of the issues that we have had at K-State, but we're coming off a 10% budget cut. Nonetheless, we're looking at where we're going moving forward. In the last year, we've had a large number of retirements and departures from the college. I just was notified today of another faculty member that's leaving K-State. We anticipate refilling positions. And so how we advance beyond that point, adding positions becomes a challenge in a budget cutting mode. And our funding model that we have in the university right now is based on undergraduate enrollment. That's the biggest driver for that enrollment-based funding model. We're seeing declining enrollment in the university, and so that makes it very difficult to be able to look at adding positions. Nonetheless, we are looking at what do we need to be in the future. So we don't just want to refill positions as they were. We want positions that are positioned for the future. We want to be looking at what our programs should be looking at in the future. We want to make sure that our instruction, that our research, and that our extension are all directed in a way that provides us the best opportunity to advance the state going forward. whenever we make a decision on a faculty hire, we could be looking at that individual being with us for 30 to 40 years. So we need to make sure that we're looking forward in making that hire. We need people that are going to be flexible, and we need to be able to identify the areas that are going to be emerging as well as those that are with us right now. Now, as we look at filling those positions, they're going to be influenced by a number of factors, and that would include things like the teaching curriculum. We're going to be interested in hearing stakeholder identified priorities, and the document that comes from this session will be one of those things that helps guide us. And we're also going to be looking at the sustainability of funding for those positions and for the kind of research and extension activities that need to happen associated with that position. So if we're working on some particular emerging crop, what happens if, first of all, there's no way to get any work on that crop funded? What happens if the crop fails and we need to come up with a retooling or a redirecting of that individual that was hired to try and work on that crop? So there's a lot of things that drive the decisions that we make in trying to fill positions. And then the other thing that we have to deal with is the competing interest and finding the balance. How much extension do we need? How much research do we need? How much teaching do we need? How much interest needs to go to the turf industry as opposed to a vegetable or fruit crop industry? Where are the opportunities? And these are all the challenges that we're dealing with as we try and figure out how to make the right hires and the right restructuring of our KSRE. And really, so when we're looking forward, what we're really interested in is creating a vision, identifying the dreams, and taking your suggestions to move us into what I would consider to be a new diversification of the agricultural enterprise. Not just everybody can go out there and raise commodity crops, but a lot of people with relatively little land can go out there and raise a profitable specialty crop that can fill a niche for them. And I think as we look at the local foods movement right now, nutrition is really one of the driving factors that could help make some of these options better for folks that are out there. One of the other things that we look at is a document that was just generated here at K-State in the last few months. And it was a charge that was put on the state universities by the Board of Regents to address their Pillar 3 priorities. And so this document from K-State takes into account 4 areas. One of those is the food and agriculture systems of innovation. There's great fits for specialty crops in that section. And one of the points that we bring up in that particular part of the document is that processing is one of the critical pieces in the expansion and diversification of our agricultural enterprise. Digital agriculture and advanced analytics probably is the least appropriate for a fit for specialty crops. But biosecurity and biodefense is really in part based on food security. And so certainly specialty crops fit there. And then K-State 105 is a part of the document that really talks about economic development in all 105 counties. And if specialty crops are not part of economic development for our state, don't hold a piece of the future for the entire state, I'd be very surprised. And then finally, the thing that we have to consider as we're looking at where our expansion and our redirection of our resources go is really looking at what the impact of those decisions have on the facilities that we have and what facilities improvements might be necessary. For example, one of the things that we're looking at is hydroponics and aquaponics. How could that become a function that we might be able to integrate into the Olathe campus, where there's some space available for redevelopment? And I guess at that point, Carrie came on, so I saw that as the hook. And I would just say that we're listening and we want to hear your questions. We want to hear your suggestions. Where we go really depends on the balance, It depends on the resources, the mission, and how those are all influenced by the stakeholder input and the market demands that we have in the specialty crop sector. So as I mentioned, it's not all about faculty, but it is about how we use the resources that we have to address the needs that you share with us. So I'm open to questions if you have any. And I
Great,
will stop
Dr.
sharing.
Draper. Yep, we do have a few questions that have come into the chat. The first one is from Gabe, and most likely maybe the specialty crop growers who have been operating for the past several years and supporting the Ag-Grow Summit, because I know we've had the conversation about a need for additional research and extension resources throughout communities across our state. But from Gabe, he asks, I understand it's hard to allocate too many staff to a small piece of the pie. So what can we do to maximize the impact of what we have? Can we do something like collaborating with our farmers for research and make citizen scientists that can contribute man hours, field, and resources?
I think that's an excellent, I don't want to step, were you done, Carrie?
I'm all done. I was just going to thank Gabe. That's a good question.
Yeah, so I think that, I think the next speaker, I think when Tom comes on and talks about external funding opportunities, I hope you're going to talk about SARE, Tom, because I think that is a great fit for how we can do some of what Gabe has just talked about. So it allows us to take some of our scarce resources and work with producers to really design some good experiments to figure out the best ways to do things. And the folks like Tom and Zach that are out there, I think have shown a great success in working with producers in their specific areas. Those are, I think, some of the kinds of positions that we need to look at trying to be able to create, but also taking advantage of those other resources. And external funding is important to the university. I think it's also important to producers. I'm not sure if any of you have looked at the president's budget proposal, but SARE saw a substantial increase from this administration. Whether Congress chooses to appropriate the funds to go along with that remains to be seen. But I'm very optimistic at some of the things that we might be able to accomplish through those funding sources.
Great, thank you, Dr. Draper. Another question came in regarding examples of woody and ornamental crops. I know, Dr. Draper, if you want to add value to explaining what plants go under woody and ornamental. I also know we have a lot of professors and some researchers who this might be their area of expertise. So feel free to jump in as well. But I'll start with Dr. Draper. The question is from Amy Hadachek. Do you know what plants go under woody and ornamental?
Well, I mean, so that's pretty broad. So when we're talking about ornamentals, we could be talking about annuals and perennials. We could be talking about any number of woody shrubs and trees. A lot of the work that's done at the Pear Center, that's done at the Geyer Forestry Center, is looking at woody plants. So a lot of things that fit into the nursery crop market would fall into that woody and ornamental crop area.
Great, thank you. And I will drop in the chat box just shortly the USDA's comprehensive definition of a specialty crop. So all on the call can read through all the subgroupings of specialty crops because there are quite a few, including obviously the woody and ornamental. I believe the last question we have for Dr. Draper is also from Amy, and the question is fairly general. Is declining enrollment at the university linked to COVID's impact?
Yeah, it's been a challenge operating under COVID issues. Our extension enterprise has done an awful lot virtually, a lot of remote activity. It's been very confusing trying to sort our way through the varying county regulations. We actually made it through the entire year without having any research labs that were shut down. although we did move at a much slower pace. So it's been a challenge, but we haven't stopped anything. We've just wound up moving at a much slower pace for most of it. Carrie, I do want to comment about one thing that Megan Kennelly shared in the chat about finding ways to build on our connections with our neighboring states. We do have one example of a shared position with the University of Missouri in London, Wadakee, out of the Kansas City metro area, working with food and nutrition. And I think it's a great model. I did some of my early career work in the Dakotas, and in North Dakota, we shared several positions with the University of Minnesota. I think it's an area that we have not developed well enough. And I think as we move into this newer environment post-pandemic, both the University of Missouri and K-State are probably going to be more willing to have some broader conversations on trying to figure out how we might be able to share some positions.
Great, thank you. And we got some likes to Dr. Kennelly's comment as well. Let's see, from Chris Frederick, we have one quick question. Any interest in K-State putting emphasis in viticulture and enology in academic research as part of specialty crop studies? I do also want to note that we have Highland and Scott Cole on with the viticulture and enology program there in Wamego. So Dr. Draper, I'm going to have you answer, and then perhaps Scott could come on and just briefly share a little bit about Highland's impact within the industry as well.
Absolutely. And I've talked with Scott a little bit too. So, I don't know that that's something that we have the bandwidth to invest in right now. And I'm not sure. So the two sides of it, the viticulture and the enology, as soon as you start producing alcohol, there's some other challenges that come into play. And Scott has had an approach to that as well, that learning and teaching how you produce is one thing. We're a research university, and so what's the research going to look like in the process as well? So it's a big investment to get into viticulture and enology. I'm not sure that might be the first place that we would go, but a lot of it depends on the demand that we see from stakeholders in the state. And so far, that's not been a loud voice that we've heard. So I'd be interested in hearing what Scott has to say too.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of call on Scott out of order here. If Scott would just like to give a very micro overview of Highland, just so Chris and others who aren't familiar with the enology and viticulture program have a good understanding of resources that are in our state for those who are wanting to operate and learn more about this area.
Thanks so much. I wasn't planning to do any presenting or talking, and I actually don't even have the camera set up in my house right now, so you can't see me. Anyhow, thanks so much, Marty and Terry both. Just in a nutshell, Highland Community College, which has several branch campuses around Northeast Kansas, but one of those branches is in Wamego, where my office is. We have degree programs and certificate programs in viticulture, which is grape growing, enology, which is winemaking. Our classes this fall semester start this Saturday, so it's not too late to enroll. Real quick marketing there, but anyhow, to kind of answer the question that Marty posed, where does the research go with that? I can say that on the viticulture side of that, Kansas State and KSRE graciously, I guess, signed on and said, hey, yes, Highland, there are some multi-state national research initiatives going on. The most recent of which is called NE 1720, and you guys graciously signed the letter that says yes, let Highland jump in and sit at the table and kind of represent Kansas on this project, and we'll see how things go. And that's been super fruitful for us. We sorry to pun. just this spring, we planted a new research vineyard at our center in Wamego. And part of that research vineyard includes some grape varieties that are coming directly from some of the different university nurseries across the United States. We have three grape varieties that came from Cornell University, New York. We have two from University of North Dakota. And next spring, we anticipate planting some from the breeding program at University of Minnesota and also South Dakota State University, kind of working on those northern tier state breeding programs that are, they're crossing, it's a cross of a cross of a cross. But essentially, they're taking those familiar European varieties, Chardonnay and Merlot and Cabernet, and crossing those with native North American grapes, trying to find that balance between what grows well in the United States with, the cold winters and the hot summers and the huge swings in temperature that we get throughout the Midwest, which they don't see that in, Europe and in California and in some of those Great Lakes states. They're able to use, the lake effect weather helps mitigate those issues as well. So that's one of the things that certainly we are participating in some of the research across the U.S. through NE 1720. Doing some of that research and being an evaluation site with those breeding programs that, they are some of the, they're the big dogs, and we're happy to be at the table. So as far as the enology side goes, a lot of that research really is based on the West Coast. There's not, I won't say there's not research happening at these same universities at Cornell and Michigan State and Minnesota and all them, but really those universities are more focused on the viticulture side, and the enology side is really more based on the West Coast right now. But we're happy that Kansas State KSRE has given us the go ahead to sit at the table and participate in all this work that's being done across the country.
I was going to mention that, Scott, but I wasn't sure how well you were engaged with the group. So I'm glad that that's working out for you. Evaluation of new materials is a really important part of trying to figure out a way to find adapted material for this part of the country.
I might add real quickly, Marty, that actually NE 1720, that group, of course, everyone has an annual conference, and in 2020, they were scheduled to come to Kansas and see our facility and meet here in Wamego. Of course, that didn't happen because of all the things happening with the pandemic. There's a fair chance that we may be trying to bring them back in 2021 to Wamego, and certainly we'd love to have you over and meet the group and say, hey, welcome to Kansas. And so if that all comes together. Of course, the pandemic is being its thing, so I don't want to get into that. But if those folks do come to Kansas, we'd love to have you come over and introduce yourself and welcome them to Kansas.
As I mentioned to you earlier, Scott, I need to get over and visit with you as well. I'd like to speak to one of the questions in the chat about the Southwest Research Center, and I didn't want to make it seem like I was neglecting the West, but the Southwest certainly. We do have some staffing issues there. We've had 2 failed searches for 2 different positions at that center just pre-pandemic, and it's been just very difficult to try and get that going. We recognize that the staffing at the Southwest Center in Garden City is not where we want it to be, but we anticipate in this next year and post September 1st, we're going to be going forward with the process of prioritizing and building kind of a plan for how we're going to start refilling some positions and moving forward. So we recognize it. We know we need to move forward with it, and we're just waiting for our strategic planning process to play out so that we can figure out where we need to start with some of those positions.
Very good. Well, thank you, Dr. Draper. We're going to continue moving on, but if you still have questions, certainly drop them into the chat and we will recognize those here towards the end of our presentation. We have a couple of more speakers that are going to share really important information. This is a really great conversation. So Janelle, I'm going to have you introduce Tom.
Thanks, Carrie. Yep. So next up is Tom Bueller, who is also from K-State Research and Extension, and he is going to be talking to us about grant opportunities. Take it away.
All right. Hopefully everyone can see my slides here. I'm going to talk kind of briefly about grant opportunities. If you do have questions, there is my email. It's pretty easy, tombuller@ksu.edu. Feel free to hit me up after the meeting with any questions you have. So first off, I always like to do this. I get people that call my office and say, where can I get a grant to start farming? And the answer is you can't really. So what are grants? You know, are grants free money? They are absolutely not free money. But they are, you know, competitive funds. So you're putting your application in against other applications, and they're usually to support certain projects. And often those projects are for the greater good. So not necessarily something that just helps your own individual farm, but something that maybe helps the broader spectrum of specialty crop producers in Kansas, or local foods in your area, or some other greater good. So sometimes people come into this thinking like, how can I get money to help my farm? And that's not the right mindset when you want to go hunting for grants. So just a few other notes, if you are out there looking for grants, and I've kind of targeted this at the farm level. The researchers at K-State Research and Extension are certainly out there looking for grants to do research on local foods, do research on specialty crops. But at the farm level, you know, some things you should note. Many of the grants are reimbursements. So you need to spend the money, and then the grant from whatever program will often reimburse you. There are a few grants that aren't like that. But when you're thinking about going after grant dollars for your farm, that's an important thing to note. You need to note ahead of time whether it's a reimbursement or not, because I have run into people who have gotten a grant to do something and they don't have the money to do that up front, and they haven't been able to do their project because they didn't have that money. They thought the money was coming to them up front, and that doesn't often happen. It does happen for some grants, but it's just something to pay attention to. The other thing, you know, when I say grants aren't free money, they're not just to do whatever you want on the farm. They're really to work on specific projects. But if you are going after grant dollars, they can be a good way to support some of those specific aspirations you have for your farm. But you also need to make sure you plan on a decent amount of time to do the paperwork and documentation required to manage that grant. So it's not just you get the money and you're home free. You've got to plan on time to do the reporting that's required or other things like that. The other thing to note here, I'm going to talk in the next couple slides about a bunch of grants that are useful, I think, for specialty crop growers in Kansas. And the one thing I want you to note is a lot of these programs operate on more or less an annual cycle. They move the dates when grants are due a few weeks one way or the other, but they come up more or less annually. So if you miss one year and you come up with a great idea, you don't have time to get the application done, don't fret, file that idea away, start working on it. You might be able to file that next year. So with those sort of overview thoughts about going for grants on your farm, we'll jump into some specific opportunities. So looking at the rest of 2021, some of these are guesses on my part based on when things are traditionally due. Some of them have already been published, and so we know what could you do with the rest of the year? What opportunities could you apply for? One that comes up usually in the fall is the NRCS EQIP cost share. A lot of people know this as the way that they do cost share on their high tunnels if they grow specialty crops. There are some other practices that could be cost shared under the EQIP program. So if you want to get certified organic, there are some dollars to help you write your organic system plan. If you use cover crops, there are some dollars to help you offset your cover crop applications. So there are dollars for a number of environmental quality improvements under that EQIP program. So you should contact your local NRCS office is the best way to find information on that. But they're usually due in the fall, often in November. I haven't seen the date for this year. And then Dr. Draper did a great job setting me up because the SARE partnership, SARE is my favorite program of the federal government. It's Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education, and they offer a lot of different grants to help farmers do research and education on farm. One of those opportunities has already been posted, and it is due October 21st is the grant deadline, and that's called the partnership. So that is a partnership between an agricultural professional, which is someone like your local research and extension agent, and at least 3 farms. So if you have some other farms in your area that are having the same problems you are, come up with an idea to solve those problems, or if you have an idea to solve those problems, you can find someone at your conservation district or your extension office to help you with manage a research project on that. You can apply for the partnership grant. I think that's up to $40,000 for a 2-year program. There's another one that's kind of similar. It's called the SARE Farmer Rancher. You can apply for this on your own farm. You don't need an agricultural professional to help you. And it is usually due in the middle of December. And the website to apply for all of those, let's see if I can dump this in the chat while I'm talking, is northcentralsare.org. These are great programs. One of the best things about them is the grant review panel is made up of other farmers. So farmers are going to be looking at what you're proposing to do and decide whether that's a good project or not. So it's not someone that doesn't know, you know, a soybean from a corn kernel. It's somebody who knows what they're talking about, is reviewing what you're proposing to do and deciding whether that's a good research project. So looking at next year, these are things that are probably coming up. They haven't been released yet, but this is kind of the normal seasonal cycle of when these grants are due. Another one of my favorite programs is the Value Added Producer Grant. So those are usually due sometime in the late spring. They've moved that around a few times over the past 5 years, but often they're due in May or June. And this is a program that will, you do have to provide some money up front, so it's a dollar for dollar match, but they will help you do things to add value to your products. And one of the things they consider adding value is marketing to a local audience. So if you market your fruits and vegetables locally, this grant can probably help you out. If you do any kinds of canning, processing, any of that, this grant can help offset some of the costs of installing that, or buying bottles or buying labels or anything like that. So it's a great grant program. The Specialty Crop Block Grant, there may be an opportunity for that this fall, but usually it comes out in the spring, in April, with applications due in May. That's another great opportunity to do some on-farm research. Again, this is for projects that really help the whole specialty crop industry, not just your farm. But if you have a problem that you think applies to other people and you have a solution you want to trial, it might be worth putting in an application to experiment with that on your farm, do some education to your neighboring growers, and maybe you can get some money to help pay for that experiment. A couple of other things that are more kind of community-based, the Local Foods Promotion Program. This is a great program that can be used to help promote local foods. So if you have a community kitchen that you're looking for to get like a community processing kitchen, some of these funds could be used for that. They've been some in the Kansas City area to help start food hubs. Lots of different things to help maybe facilitate your life as a specialty crop producer. Another thing, the Farmers Market Promotion Program. These are usually both come out at the same time in the spring, usually April, and maybe the applications are due in May or early June. And the Farmers Market Promotion Program can provide money to help your local farmers market do some promotion, help it improve its marketing, help it get more people to the markets, and bring you more customers. So there's a lot of grant opportunities. Those are all kind of in the agricultural vein. There are some other ones if you want to think outside the agricultural box. So think about things that support healthy lifestyles, because healthy lifestyles means eating fruits and vegetables. So that's what specialty crop producers feed into. So there are a number of communities around the state that have Blue Cross Blue Shield Pathways grants. Here in Douglas County, we've received one of those to triple the SNAP benefits at our local farmers markets for fruits and vegetables specifically. So that's basically $5,000 we've got going directly into the pockets of local farmers to help low-income people purchase more fruits and vegetables. There are a number of other community foundations across the state that like to support good things going on in your community, and specialty crops, local foods, farmers markets, all of those things are community building enterprises. And you should think of them that way and go after some of these grant funds. There's other things I haven't even mentioned, I don't have time to mention, but just be open-minded when you're thinking about ways to support the projects you're trying to work on. If you've never written a grant, just a few things here. There is help available. So Extension has workshops on how to write grants. Your local Extension office can help with that, or you can reach out to Nancy Daniels, who is our community vitality specialist. A lot of these grant programs have staff that will help you, like the SARE program. We've got Carrie Ebert here in the state that will help you work on your grant application. There's also the Michael Fields Institute that will help you with some grant writing for agricultural producers. If you apply once and don't succeed, you can get feedback. What didn't they like about your application? And next year you can apply for the same grant, but change those things they didn't like to make it more a better application. And finally, if you're all out of ideas, you need help, feel free to reach out to me. There is my email. I'll drop it in the chat too. I've written and received many of the grants I've mentioned and failed at a lot of the other ones. So I know a decent amount and am happy to help you if I can. With that, I will turn it over. I think to Cal is up next.
Actually, you are correct, but we're going to do a really quick poll because you've been talking so much about grant opportunities, which is absolutely great that we were going to do the quick, because the Kansas Department of Agriculture is looking at especially crop block grant opportunities. So really quick here before we go to questions, we were going to pop up the options. So I just want each of you to vote with your top one. If we were looking at specialty crop block opportunities, what would be most beneficial to you and your farm, winery, whatever we're talking about? Is it funding to access education and training? Is it funding to enhance producer value added in marketing of crops? Is it funding to research specialty crop viability? Or is it funding to respond to COVID-19 impacts? And then also, if you have other things, you can drop it in the chat. So I'll give everybody here about 30 more seconds, and I'll do a quick recap of that, and then I'll turn it over to Carrie for questions that we have been having pop up in the chat.
Sure, I'm just going to provide while everyone's thinking through this survey question. The reason why we added this survey question is because the Kansas Department of Agriculture will receive a second round of specialty crop block grant funding through a federal stimulus HR 133 bill. So we have been, we've gone ahead and requested acceptance through USDA of these funds, and we are in the process of developing a grant program to support the specialty crop industry with hopefully a rollout later this fall. We have worked with the specialty crop growers to solicit some feedback, but we are still operating within the constraints of USDA, and the specialty crop block grant program does have limitations and is designed specifically to leverage efforts to market and promote specialty crops, assist producers with research and development, expand availability to access, and then address local, regional, and national challenges for specialty crop producers. One thing though, that we may have the opportunity is to look at opportunities perhaps to direct to producer. So we are working to gather feedback. With any USDA grant, there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of requirements to meet goals and objectives. So we're working through feedback and giving consideration to, if we can, what would it look like if we offered a % of the funding direct to producer. So we value your feedback, and we wanted to make sure we had this survey as just another point person or a point for data collection as we work over the next several weeks to develop the program. Thank you, Janelle.
No problem. Thanks, Carrie. So looking at the poll results, we're pretty neck and neck with our top two, but the winner at 46% is funding to enhance producer value added and marketing of crops. And then the second one at 38% was funding to research specialty crop viability and improvement in the state of Kansas. So thanks much for taking that poll. And then I'm going to let Carrie look through chat here really quick while I just give Cal a quick minute to show his face and make sure all of you know who he is and what he does.
Everyone pretty much knows me. Just remember when we talk about the reality that there are a lack of resources in the state, even though KDA funds my position for produce safety, my background is in production and operations management. And a lot of you I've worked with, and please let others know as well, I will talk shop all day, regardless if it's produce safety or production. And everyone knows how to get me in our website, Produce Safety K-State. Just Google it and you can find us.
Awesome. So we're so glad Cal joined us a few years ago from Florida. So it's good to have him in Kansas with his deep understanding of the industry. I do have a question that came in, and I'm going to pose it to Cal because he is out across the state and on farms. The question's from Amy Hadachek, and she said, can you name the most popular fruits and vegetables grown through specialty crops in Kansas? And are there any new or latest ones that are being grown in Kansas? Any new varieties or any new, I guess, specialty crops that haven't historically been grown?
And the folks with KSCGA could answer this pretty good too. The staples are always going to be tomatoes, peppers, and then on the berry side, they're easy to move. One thing I caution with growers, as I've noticed in this state, people try to grow everything in small volumes, and that can be hard from a marketing and lifestyle perspective. So again, this goes back to just how you want to view production and grow within 5 years. And like I said, I do hands-on consultations at farms, so feel free to get me anytime. And then if the KSCGA folks want to talk about stuff they're seeing for new crops or moving, feel free.
Good. Thanks, Cal, for answering that. Janelle, I don't see any other specific questions in the comment that we haven't already addressed. I do want to note Peter put a reference in there. He had raised his hand during Dr. Draper, but he had just noted his support for the Highland program as well. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Janelle because we've run over a little bit of time and it's time to move on and close out for the night. So Janelle, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Yes, thanks, Carrie. And right before I do the final wrap up here, Gabe with KSCGA is just going to hop on and give a few little thoughts, and then I will give you guys the final information about upcoming things happening here in the next couple of weeks.
Thanks, Janelle. I just want to say, please, if you haven't joined KSCGA, do so. Give us a year and consider it a $10 trial. It's pretty cheap. And hopefully we can connect you with some good things, education, other growers. And I also wanted to thank Dwayne Simon. We asked him to come on just to raise awareness about WPS. A lot of things are changing. And I know that a lot of growers in our state are completely unaware of WPS standards, and it's going to help make us safer and reduce your liability. Also want to thank Dr. Draper. There's a big thing going on here that I feel is a transition and a push towards specialty crops for the value and the nutrition and many reasons that Dr. Draper had a couple of slides that pointed out. The value density of these crops are fantastic to help diversify a farm and get through some tough years, because I don't see food ever tanking like a commodity could. And when I say food, I'm talking, pick it off the vine and eat it versus processing. So anyways, I just want to commend Marty Draper. He's been, reactive and proactive in my experience. And I hope that he continues to push the ball forward for us on specialty crops.
Great. Thanks, Gabe. I appreciate it. So thank you to everyone on the call for participating tonight in our specialty crops session. It was a lot of great information shared tonight. There was a lot of great questions and comments and discussion, and we always love having that. We do hope you are all planning to join us on August 26th for the Ag Growth Summit. You can still register on our page for that, and I will drop that into the chat box for everyone. And also, please remember that we are doing our second year of the Kansas Department of Agriculture's Kansas Ag Heroes. We encourage you to submit nominations of any individual, family, or businesses in Kansas agriculture that you feel provided a notable contribution to the agricultural industry or their community. And I will also drop that in the chat so you are able to do any of those nominations. And thank you again for joining us. I'll be sending out a recap to everyone with the video link once we get that. And have a great rest of your evening. And hopefully we all get some rain and not as much heat as they're forecasting. So have a great rest of your Thursday night, and we will talk to you all later.